David Babbitt for arranging this talk tonight. And first of all, I would just like to make it clear that I did not invite Matt Dunn because he's running for governor. I invited him because he's manager of community affairs at Google. And also, libraries and Googles have a lot of things in common. We both are in the pursuit of information for people. We do have, I must say, a love-hate relationship with it. There's hardly a question that a reference librarian cannot answer anymore because of Google. You know, we can sit down there and, you know, if we can't find it in our collection, we can go on the web and find it in a virtual collection somewhere. But as libraries need Google, Google needs libraries, because I'm sure you've heard of the Google Book Project, where they are seeking to digitize the world's books through the major research libraries in the U.S. And if this comes to pass, it's still held up in litigation in some various ways. It will make an incredible modern-day Library of Alexandria. And so I applaud that. The one thing I hope is that we will have public access to this, because these are public institutions making these works available to Google. I guess the hate part that I have to say is the privacy concerns that I have with Google. As a librarian, we protect people's right to privacy to the hilt. In fact, there's a state law that does protect that, and I'll be interested to see what Matt has to say about that. Next week, American Library Association is sponsoring Choose Privacy Week, the entire week, May 2nd to 8th. You can go to the website, ala.org, find out more about it. We have a display down in the main room of the library about privacy, and I hope you'll take note of that. As I said, Matt is Google's manager of community affairs. Which supports all aspects of the company's local corporate social responsibility activities in 25 U.S. communities where Google has an office or data center, helping to guide large corporate partnerships with the nonprofit and public sector. Before joining Google, he was the associate director of the Rockefeller Center at Dartmouth College, creating programs to support students to pursue careers in the nonprofit and public sector. He's also served as director of the AmeriCorps Vista, overseeing 6,000 full-time people working in the fight against poverty. He has served both in the Vermont House and Senate. He lives in Heartland, Vermont, on a farm where he grew up with his wife, Sarah Taylor, who happens to be a novelist who writes mysteries, I believe, at this point, and his two sons. So please welcome Matt Dunn.
So thank you so much for having me here and for inviting me down. It seems to work. Okay, so as was introduced, my name is Matt Dunn. I live up in Heartland, where I grew up. I actually had an IT background when I was in the legislature. I got elected at 22, straight out of college, and was fortunate enough to have a mentor of mine bring me on board with a software company in Wilder, Vermont, called Logic Associates, that we helped grow to about 120 employees. I then did my tour with the Clinton administration, came back, was in the legislature, and worked at Dartmouth. And then I ran for statewide office, where I got to know a few of the folks here in this room. Did well, which I was very excited about, was able to win a primary, but didn't quite make it in the general election. And it was that moment where I said, boy, I'm going to have to find something else to do, because I had left Dartmouth, we had created the programs and moved on. And it was a couple weeks later when a friend of a friend called me and said, apparently we need someone with your weird background to help us at Google figure out how to do community in a better way. And the way actually I describe it is that my job is to bring a little bit of Vermont to Google. And that's has been a wonderful challenge across the board. So one of the things that I do all across the country in that capacity is to help people understand the various tools that we have available specifically to the nonprofit world and to small businesses. Because we, as Google, as a philosophy, we don't do a lot of advertising. Now, we broke that rule with a certain Super Bowl ad that you may have seen, but for the most part, we've allowed our products to be shared by word of mouth. And we seem to have done okay with that as a basic approach. But there is a whole slew of different things that we have available that help nonprofit organizations and small businesses that many of those that it's intended to help don't know about. So I spend a chunk of my time in other parts of the country, not so much here in Vermont, doing these kinds of demonstrations to share these. And I'm spending more and more of my time training other groups, whether it's people who work at Google or people outside of Google, to be able to do these same kind of demonstrations, because we're happy to share it as far and wide as we possibly can. So what I'm going to do is walk you through a presentation, and we're going to talk about what Google, how Google looks at its mission in the world, and then I'm going to walk through a few of the products that we have, and then be able to hopefully have some time for some questions. Let me just start off by saying, how many people here are here because you are affiliated with a nonprofit organization and want to learn? Okay. How many of you are here because you own a small business and you wanted to learn? My, okay. And how many of you are here because Betty Fry told you you had to be? Okay, all right, no, one, good. I knew there had to be someone in it. You know, it's always important to figure out your audience before you get started. All right, so we've got a good mix here. I'm going to be orienting this a little bit more to the nonprofit world, and because that's usually the audience I talk to. But most of these tools are available to the small business world, or the lessons that I'm going to convey, hopefully, or at least engage you in, are ones that are also applicable to small business. So if you have questions as we go along, let me know, but I'm going to try to address it in both directions. Does that work? Good. Okay. So first of all, I want to start off with Google's mission. And Google's mission as a company, and we are a corporation, I want to be clear about that, and there are perfectly good questions that I'm happy to talk about at the end as well about issues of privacy and other kinds of things. We very much own those issues, and we feel that it's very important to talk about those. I'm going to be focusing on this, but we can certainly get into that, or China, or anything else that you want to talk about. But Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now, it's a kind of bold statement in general. We were just talking about reference librarians and other kinds of folks. But I want to just focus in on those two words at the end, because we said universally useful, universal access and usefulness. And those are two very different things. You can make the world's information accessible to everyone, but if it's not in a useful form, it's not going to do you any good. Or we could make a very limited amount of information that is made really easy to use, but you wouldn't get the benefit of the whole scope of information. So we really do look at those two things in tandem as we build out our products and our services, and we share them across the board. We also are passionate about access to that information. And when we say access, we mean not only that you can get to it when you're on the internet, but we also are adamant about making sure that people have access to the hardware that allows you to connect. We've been involved in a lot of the support of bringing netbooks to third world countries that can be distributed at very low cost, but also the other side of the digital divide, which is making sure that you have access to high-speed internet. I know that's not an issue at all in Vermont, ever. And it's something that we've been involved with as a company for a while, both in terms of investments in companies. We make investments in companies that we think will deploy that, but we also do it on the philanthropic side. And part of my work has been going to rural parts of America to allow there to be free and open access to internet. And that's something that I enjoy doing particularly. I learned that it's a lot easier to talk about it than to actually do it, but that it is doable. We also are committed to our users. We listen, we adjust our products at a very, very rapid rate, and we are committed as a company to making those products better and better and better given that feedback. And I'll talk about this in a second, but we have a theory of putting it out there even before it might be ready. You may have noticed that I think Gmail just came out of beta, and that's because we didn't really feel it was ready. Even for years that people were using it, we were still getting a lot of feedback that we then plow back into our products. And the final piece is collaboration. The intent of our tools is to allow not just one person to be able to use it, but multiple people. Whether that's building a site someplace, or it's working on a particular document, or it's being able to use any computer anywhere to be able to do a presentation. Someone was giving me a hard time because I am using PowerPoint. We'll get into the other products that are out there. But unfortunately, the fact is, until you know that there's always going to be high-speed internet, we're still limited to using some of these things that have to reside on a laptop or in one of these little USB port devices. But we're getting to the place where you can hopefully be able to collaborate and allow that communication to happen freely. So our philosophy in terms of philanthropy fits into a couple of categories, and I'm going to talk a little bit about philanthropy in general, and then I'm going to talk about Google for nonprofits in 3 areas. One is increasing awareness for your nonprofit, the second is collaborating, and the third is staying informed. So again, this is our mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And that is what we commit to when we're doing our philanthropy. But I wanted to give you a sense of why this might be important to small businesses and nonprofits. And I just wanted to throw up a few statistics. These are, you'll see it better if I move over here. I don't want to take anyone out of the process. And it's important to just sort of think about why it is that this platform is relevant now. And so these are a few stats. These are a little dated now, but bear with me. That there is approximately 1.5 billion people that are online. And to give you a sense of context, that's up from 500 million in 2003. And I believe the latest statistics that I've seen is that we're now approximating, we're at 2 billion, if not a little bit above that. In 2008, there was almost $450 billion in e-commerce sales across the world. It's a lot of money that's exchanging hands. There is 2 billion Google searches worldwide every day. Now, we're talking about a number of zeros that I have difficulty getting my head around, but it's a lot. There is 2 million emails sent per second. So if you think about the distance we've come from, in 1992, there was very few people using email at all the way to now that there's 2 million sent per second. You get a sense of the traffic and the information flow that's going on in 2 directions. And then one of my favorite ones is, as some of you may know, Google owns YouTube, which is one of the video sites that are available. And right now, there is 20 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. We don't erase anything on YouTube for the most part. And for those of you who are mathematicians, you can probably figure out if there's 20 hours going up per minute and we don't erase anything, the amount of video is becoming enormous. In fact, we have exceeded the point where the amount of video that's uploaded per year could be seen in a person's lifetime if you just started watching.
But video doesn't use much bandwidth, though.
Video does not use...
That was a joke.
Oh, yeah. Video doesn't use much bandwidth, nor does it take a lot of storage, right? So you can imagine, in fact, some of the work that I do is where we cite data centers, right? One of the things that Google has figured out is that if you put all of the servers, all the pieces, parts that go into a computer all in one central location, you can get much more computing power and storage power in that one location. And in fact, you can run those servers a lot more efficiently. Like the cost of electricity for running the servers in our data centers is a fraction of the aggregate number of computers that run it on. But it does mean we have to build these very, very large data centers to be able to accommodate that amount of information that is adding on a regular basis. So in the philanthropy area, we focused on a few different things. We have something called Google.org. Google.org is our philanthropic arm. We do not take proposals in Google.org, so there's not a place that you could apply for things. But we seek out proactively proposals in a few different areas. The biggest one is our RE less than C initiative, which is appropriately geeky terminology for a company like Google. And what it stands for is renewable energy less expensive than coal. Google, as a company, is very concerned about climate change. And we support a variety of different initiatives to make sure that we're reducing carbon. But we felt that the best way that we could contribute to that is that as a company that knows good technology and innovators when we see it. And so what we do is we invest in companies that have technologies that we believe have a reasonable likelihood of actually generating renewable energy that's less expensive than coal. We support lots of legislation to reduce emissions and those kinds of things, but ultimately we think that the capitalist system will drive things even faster than governments will. And so we wanted to see if we could help with the marketplace so that we could actually have coal be obsolete because there are other alternatives that are actually less expensive. We're also involved with recharged information technology to allow for electric plug-in vehicles. We work with something called Predict and Prevent, which is the effort to be able to predict diseases before they actually happen so that we can intervene earlier. An example of that is that Google is now large enough as a company that and as a search engine that people use, that the #1 predictor of flu outbreaks in the United States actually comes from looking at Google searches. We can actually predict 2 weeks before anything else that the CDC has when there's going to be a flu outbreak by changes above the norm of people putting certain search terms in, like sore throat or congestion. So we work in collaboration with the CDC to be able to say, you know what, there's an outbreak, it's going to hit here, you need to make sure that there is resources available to be able to address it as quickly as possible so it doesn't break out any further. And we are very excited about the potential for being able to aid in things beyond flu, other kinds of epidemics that cause damage and frequently take away lives. So that's something that we do. I want to point out that we don't identify the people who put in those terms. It's just whether or not there is a frequency that's happening within a particular geographic area against the norm that we know what the norm will be. We also do things in Inform and Empower. That's basically our commitment to making sure that more people have access to information, because we believe that that leads to better democracies across the board, and small and medium-sized enterprises. Google started as a small company. We are committed to helping particularly developing nations to be able to grow by giving resources and support to individuals who want to start small businesses. So that's another focus area that we do, particularly in helping them with IT access and the like. We also empower our employees, and I'll mention this quickly. One is we do gift matching. So I, as a Google employee, if I make a donation to a charitable organization, Google matches it 1-to-1 up to a certain level. We have something called self-powered commuters, which means people who ride their bike or walk to work. We actually give them direct resources they can donate to a nonprofit. So we try to encourage people to do the right thing by allowing them to do more right things. We also have a program called the 20% Project Program, which is only for engineers. But for engineers at Google, they are allowed to use 20% of their time on anything they want. Now, it has to have the Google Hub as a part of it, so using our core competencies and tools, but frequently they take on nonprofit projects, and I'll give you an example of one in a bit, or they work on something that may turn into a product down the line. That's how we keep creativity going, but also allows people to make a difference. And then finally, Google Serve, which was started by a AmeriCorps alum, a guy named Seth Marvin, who said, you know, there are all of these Google employees who want to give back. Why don't we set a day when Googlers, we actually call ourselves that with a straight face, Googlers across the country will go out and make a difference in their community doing service. And the work that Seth and I have done together is to make sure we're doing things that not just anyone can do, but wiring up homeless shelters so that individuals who are going through a tough transition time can actually communicate with their family or with a potential employer. Or we have other kinds of, we go out and do things like this to make sure that nonprofits are empowered to be able to do effective work. So those are the ways that we do it on the initiative side. And then in my world, in community affairs, we also do some local philanthropy and grants and broadband deployment, but that's only in the areas where we have large offices and data centers. Unfortunately, the Google Vermont office, which is in the Tip Top Bread Factory building in White River, only has 2 people in it, so it doesn't quite count. But it's a good program, very similar in focus to the areas that I just mentioned. So let me start off by asking you, how many people in here can name 2 Google products? 2 Google products. Hold it, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. I want you to leave your hands up if you can name 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to call on you, by the way. So just heads up. 6, 7. 7. All right, we have a. You don't count. Okay. Hey,
I don't know if I got it, but I can.
let's see if you can do 7.
Okay, so Google Scholar,
Scholar, good.
Google Maps,
Yep.
Google Labs,
Yep. Good.
YouTube,
Yep.
Gmail,
Yep.
Search,
Yep.
Earth.
Earth. Very good. All right. That is usual. Do anyone have any others they want to add? Yeah. Analytics. Yep.
Documents.
Documents.
Translate.
Picasa.
AdSense.
AdSense as a piece of it. Reader. Yep.
Alerts.
Calendar. Alerts. There are over 100. And frankly, every week we actually do a product overview as a company, and we get to see one, so we can keep up with what's coming out on a regular basis. We also get rid of products, right? When they don't work, we have a low bar for getting things out there to try it. People don't like it, they don't use it, we get rid of it. But there's over 100 that's out there. How many of you have paid for, and this will be an interesting question, how many of you have paid for a Google product? One. Which one?
I think AdWords or AdSense for my advertising.
AdWords for your advertising, which usually answers the question, but I want to point out it's only one person. The way that we make our money is off of advertising. Now, it's not exclusively true. We do have some things like Google Enterprise, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and some other elements that we pay for, but they're less well known. But a majority of our revenue comes from advertising. Last year, we did over $20 billion in advertising in the year, so it seems to be working okay. But that is how we make the resources, and we do that and are able to then offer all these products for free as a result. So, so when we're doing, when someone does advertising, they're doing it to be able to get a brand and message everywhere and bring back traffic and dollars to you as an individual. That's why anyone does advertising ever. We have a specific flavor of advertising that we have been using and rolling out over a period of time, and we're going to talk about a few of those pieces. So in the advertising world, let me just give you a little bit of background. Hopefully you recognize this screen. It's our standard search engine screen. And you have 2 areas here. You've got let me make sure I don't have the, yeah. So you've got 2 areas to this. You've got this center area here, which isn't highlighted, which is called our natural search. no advertising ever affects the natural search. Okay, you put in search words, we come up, we use our algorithm to find out what we think is most relevant to what you're looking for. Seems to work pretty well because people keep coming back to Google on that. But we do not adjust this at all based on advertising. And our feeling is that if we did, people wouldn't trust it as much and they would go someplace else. And as we frequently say internally as well as externally, we're only one click away from people going to a different search engine. So we feel it's very, very important to stay committed to that. Over here are where we have our ads. And these are ad links. And these ads are ones that are posted by businesses or nonprofits. And I'll talk about that in a second. And the way that you, and a business only gets charged for that ad if someone actually clicks on it. Right? So the ads are based on a combination of the relevance, the same thing that we use to determine this, this search result here. But it also is determined based on a bid price. I'll run through this very quickly, which is that individuals can bid on a combination of words. So if you said Airstream Parts, right, you were an Airstream part dealer, you would be able to go in and say, I want to pay up to $1 per click for someone who puts in the words Airstream Parts. And let's say there's a competitor who also does Airstream Parts, and they said, I want to bid up to 50 cents for Airstream Parts, for those words for individuals who put it into the search engine. If the first person who bid $1 gets clicked on, their ad gets clicked on, it'll appear higher, right? If it's basically the same kind of company, it'll appear higher on the list because positioning is important for where someone will go first. If they click on it and there are only those two bidders, then it will be, that business will be charged 51 cents, exactly 1 cent more than the next highest bidder. Does that make sense? If you don't click on it, if no one clicks on it ever, no one ever gets charged. Right? So it's actually very, it's low risk for a business because they are only being charged if actually someone clicks through. You can't say that really in the newspaper world, right? You're actually buying an ad and you're really hoping that someone will actually go through, and you're actually paying for a lot of views of people who aren't really interested in what you are selling, right? In this case, it's actually people who are looking specifically, in this case, for Airstream Parts, right? So they actually are asking for that. It's showing up there, and it's only when you click on it does someone actually get charged. Yeah?
Sorry, I'm
That's
sort
okay.
of new to this. When you were saying one person was going to pay $1 per click,
Yep.
somebody else is going to pay 50 cents per click.
They bid those.
They bid those.
Yep.
Now, I'm sorry, I lost the next step where you said 51 cents.
So so you got one person who said, I'll pay up to $1, and the other person said, I'll pay up to 50 cents.
Yeah.
And you don't know what the other person is doing. It's an ongoing auction process. If someone actually clicks on that person who said, I'll bid up to $1, they are charged 51 cents. Right, so it's exactly 1 penny. Now, if Sam's Airstream Parts comes in literally a second later and presses yes, I want to bid on that same combination of words, and they bid 75 cents, the next time someone clicks on that top bidder, they will be charged 76 cents. Okay? So that's basically how it works. And the auction is ongoing all the time. It never stops. It's all automated. And so people are pulling out, they're putting in, you can cap it at any time, you can say I only want to spend, right? And so for many words, like Airstream Parts, it's actually really inexpensive. I think Airstream Parts is still in it. Like, it would be, 11 cents per click to be in the top position because there aren't a lot of people who are dealing in Airstream Parts. So there's a whole range of things that happen, but you can actually see trends that happen over time. So here's one of my favorite. What do you think is the most expensive AdWord? Right? Assuming that people are bidding all the time on different combinations of words, They are always, and there's fluctuations, but they're thinking about, all right, someone who wants my product, what will they put into the search engine?
Free.
Right? Nope, free is not. Free is not. But it's an interesting, it's not.
Computer.
David, what?
Plug the power in.
Oh, plug the power in. Yes, good idea. Thank you.
Gold.
Gold? Nope, gold isn't. Yep.
Malpractice.
Malpractice. Now, we're getting, are you a lawyer? No? Okay. You're getting closer. Now think about, go in that trajectory. All right? Now, if you're a person who's searching, do you search, if it's the person that someone down the line that you're going, is malpractice the word that you would put in?
Lawsuit.
Personal injury.
Lawyer.
Personal injury, lawsuit. It's actually much more specific than that. It's really, really specific.
Divorce.
No? Oh, it is. So the number one ad word, because you want to think about it also in terms of things that are really, really targeted. Someone might put in divorce for a wide variety of reasons, which wouldn't actually lead to a click-through. So the number one ad word is mesothelioma. So, number one ad word. At times, I believe this is still the case, at times it goes for over $100 a click. And mesothelioma, for those of you who don't know, is a cancer which is caused almost exclusively from asbestos exposure. And in the strange marketplace of AdWords, that is the topic there. But most of the bids are less, most of the clicks are less than 25 cents. I think that's still the case. And as a result, we make that, it's a quarter here, a quarter there, and it seems to add up to $22 billion. So, yes?
So the words in the right-hand column,
Yep.
click-through ads, seem to change radically when you go to page 2 or
Yep.
page 3.
Yep.
So is there a page ranking there that you can pick?
So there's a combination of things. So you bid you have some parameters that you can use. So first thing is how high you bid, right? And some people just sort of go low ball, and we will rotate some people who bid lower in order to see if it's more relevant. Since we've got so many of these impressions that are happening, we want to make sure that the AdWords are also relevant to the people who are doing the search, as well as bidding the most. And this is interesting for small businesses, because you can be a small business that's really niche, and when your AdWord shows up against a certain set of searches, it works great. So let's say Ford wants to be everywhere that someone's asking about in an automobile-like part. And so Ford tries to buy Airstream Part, right? Because it's just another part. But the Airstream Part dealer, and actually I have a friend in Montpelier who that's what he deals in, he does quite well actually, is much more relevant, but can't afford to keep up with Ford, which is bidding, $5 a click, and the small business can only afford, 25 cents. We actually look over time as to which of those is more relevant to the people who search, and we will advance an ad that is more relevant, even if it's bidding much, much lower. Because we actually feel it's important to our users that the ads are also relevant searches. So that's how we do that. Yeah?
One thing I don't understand about this, if you were advertising a real estate agency in San Francisco.
Yep, real estate agency in San Francisco. This is the other parameter.
But you used real estate as a term?
Yep.
Might that be a mistake because someone looking in Florida for Florida real estate might end up clicking on your...
Perfect segue. One of the other things that we allow people to do, in fact we encourage it, is you can do geographic parameters. So you can choose a country, you can choose a state, you can choose a zip code, you could choose to draw a line on a Google map.
You mean from where they're doing the search?
From where they are doing the search.
They may be relocating to San Francisco.
Your hope is that they would put in real estate San Francisco, and Google is smart enough, or at least the algorithm we have to know that you're looking for something in San Francisco, even if you're coming from Vermont. But if you just put in real estate, you just put in real estate, and you're sitting at a Vermont located computer, or where the IP address is in Vermont, it will likely just show real estate opportunities in Vermont. Or if someone is really being targeted about it, it might be for downtown Brattleboro, because you can actually target it in that focused in area depending on where it is. There are real estate companies in Vermont that are most likely targeting New York City, right? Because they're specializing in second homes. They may only post second homes on a certain page, and they may only pick a couple of zip codes in New York City, right? You can really, really target it down to be able, and we encourage people to do that. A, we want customers who are paying us to be happy, but also we know that that makes it much tighter a relevance for the people who are actually using this and want to use the ads. Yeah?
Does that work across countries? You know, if I wanted to target Canada?
Absolutely. Yep. You can anywhere we are, we have a presence. You can target. Any other questions on AdWords, just as a concept? Yeah.
I might be a little bit beyond the ads, but going to the general area of the search.
Yep.
The first two,
Yep.
say in this, where there's just a single line.
Where they're right here.
You would not characterize those as ads.
These are.
These are.
So here's the other piece.
Okay.
So these two, sometimes it's hard to see here. Sometimes they're highlighted in yellow, and we put right up here sponsored links. And when you see sponsored anything, you should know that people are paying for them. These are ads that are really, really good by Google standards. A, people have bid pretty high, so they show up in the ranking. But repeatedly, people who do searches under this have actually gone to that ad when it was rotated over here. And we give them then special status in the sponsored links. Then below that are some AdWords have sponsored links associated with them. Many do not. But those are the differences. And it's funny. People, I was the one who said, really? We make all that money from that? I never click on the ads on the side, right? I just look at the natural search and go there. Because there are billions of these searches, the small number that do make up for the rest. And in fact, people are frequently, looking for something to buy. In which case, what comes up here may be a review in Consumer Reports or something else, which might be helpful. But also, they may just want to buy it. And when it shows up there and says 50% on, this hair product, you click there and you get a good deal.
You should mention that you have tutorials when you're setting up your criteria.
Yep.
If you don't understand something, you click on it, and a box appears, or whatever you call it, that explains it. And then there's also explanations elaborating on the explanations.
Yep. It's getting better and better and better. We used to be, figure it out,
And then
we got.
they ask, was this helpful or was it not?
Yep. And we get that feedback, and we build off just like we do with the ads and the searches. We try to improve it over time. Yeah.
Do you know, and is it possible to share what the average click-through rate is?
I
Percentage?
I do not know.
Mhm.
I do not know, and I don't think I would be able to share that. But it is.
What was that question?
Well, what is the click-through rate? Like, of the number of the people who do searches, how many of them actually click on a particular ad, or on an ad at all? What is interesting, though, for those of you who have used this, is that it's also all trackable. When someone clicks through, not only do you know who clicked through when, you can also track using Google Analytics and other tools all the way through to whether or not they did a fulfillment. So if you have a place on your site where you can buy something, you know that with this combination of AdWords, because one combination of AdWords may get a lot of people clicking through and going to your site, but none of them actually buying something. But another one, which gets very few click-throughs, but 50% of the people who click through actually buy something, tells you that might be a better ad. And we make it easy for you to see that entire process of transaction so that you can say, all right, I want to stop doing this ad that seems to be costing me money because they're clicking on it all the time, but they're not buying anything, and I want to actually put more resources behind that one that seems to lead people to actually purchase something online, or fill out a form, or in a nonprofit, make a donation. And we can track that for you all the way through the process and even give you mechanisms to know whether it's high-end things or low-end things and where they're coming from. So it's a very, very, I ran marketing for the software company up in Wilder, Vermont. And I so wish we had this, because we were out there guessing. You get those bingo cards back and everything else and trying to figure out what works and what provides return on investment. This shows you right away what that return on investment is. And because you can limit the amount you want to spend, you can say, I want to try this out and I want to spend $10 this month. And it just stops. After you do $10, you see how those ads worked, whether it clicked through, whether it didn't, whether it led to a fulfillment. So that's the other big advantage to it. Yeah?
Just clarification, the top two sponsored links.
Yep.
Is that I got confused. Is that a separate product as AdWords?
Nope, they're the same.
Same
They're
product.
just for ads that have proven over a period of time to be very relevant to people who do searches.
So if I'm Ford,
Yep.
and I got the Airstream Parts
Yep.
keywords, and I want to pay $5 a click,
You can't end up in the sponsored links
unless I'm relevant,
unless
I've
people
gotten enough
have
flow through.
frequently gone, and there's 2 ads, and there's the, Joe's Airstream Parts, and there's Ford, buy a car now.
So you're saying those top two, in a sense, are a natural selection of your paying customer?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And I just thought, if people know, what's his name, Timothy Ferriss, his book, The 4-Hour Workweek,
Mm-hmm.
you know, these internet guys, everyone, soon in the future we'll all just sell to each other on the internet. No one will have to have a good job. But he got the title for that book using Google.
Oh, is that right?
Did you read in the book?
I did not read it.
He thought,
but I know
what's a book title that will make people buy it? And so he threw in, he bought a bunch of Google search terms, and the top one was 4-Hour Workweek. He's got
the marketplace. What's also interesting is that on trends, on those kinds of things, you also see how we were able to see some of the small business concerns or some of the economic concerns before there were other indicators, because people put in keywords like bankruptcy help or other kinds of. And so there's all kind. We have a chief economist at Google who literally goes through and watches for trends and then tries to share those publicly, so that people can see. I mean, some stuff is our own intellectual property, but a lot of it we feel is helpful to the greater community to know what's happening out there, because it's a big enough platform. So that's how this works. Now, here's the good news. Sorry, one more.
I'm sorry, can you give a general idea of a budget?
It's all over the place. So we have some companies that are spending literally millions of dollars on AdWords.
For a small business.
For a small business, it's going to depend. And the nice thing, what I certainly recommend, and I'm not in the ad sales business, but I recommend you start off with something like $100, right? And you say, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to start playing around. Because what you do is you create different campaigns based on different combinations of words and based on different ads. And you can test different messages. You can test them instantly. And so you can figure out little things like you want to put the search word that's in there, like Airstream, in your headline. Right, it's a pain in the neck to do all these little campaigns with all these different ads if you might have 47 products, but it's probably worth your time. And if you're a small business that can be nimble, you can actually get ahead of other ones by having what they're looking for show up over here. Other things like capitalizing, if your name of your business or your nonprofit is in your URL, you capitalize the words so that you read the name of your business. It doesn't just look like, for whatever reason, that seems to increase the number of things that go over. My wife actually is a novelist. She writes murder mysteries. Her name is Sarah Taylor, much more talented than I am. And she also teaches writing in something called the Writer's Center. And I had this great time, trying out AdWords for the Writer's Center, because you can imagine a wide variety of different combinations of words that someone would put in if they were looking for writing classes. Is it writing workshops? Is it writing classes? Is it poetry classes? Is it write your own novel? All of them also have different costs, right, to be able to show up high enough. And so you're sort of balancing those different things, and you can get all into the analytics, and suddenly it's 3 in the morning and you really should go to bed. But it's a very, very powerful tool to be able to drill down and figure out which combination of words work for your target audience, especially if you have a mechanism for a fulfillment, whether it's to email you or to fill out a form, or to make a contribution, or even to make a sale, so that you can be testing different things to make sure you're getting the highest return on investment. Any other questions on AdWords?
What typically is the number of combinations of words, the number of words that you see?
Another great question. So it's rarely one, and it's usually in the 2, 3, or 4 category, and then once you get over 4, it drops off. Right? So I think 2, 3, and 4 are fairly even. I have that stat somewhere in there, but then after, people just don't put in long combinations of words. Yeah.
Aren't you giving us a little guidance there? If, say, you're interested in Airstream Parts.
Sure.
And so you say Airstream Parts, that's what you're searching for.
Right.
And it comes up, and at the very top of the list are 2 combinations that you know are going to work, because they work and work and work and work.
Right.
So why wouldn't you use those?
I don't know. You should.
You might have the market may have bid the price of those 2 words up, and
So-
it's out of your budget.
But what's interesting is that Google is actually focused on what are known as the long tail businesses. Right? It's not the big sellers of big commodity things. The more niche you are in what you offer, for the most part, the better the value you get out of something like search advertising. Right? If you're some universe of people that want very, very specific things. So, for example, for my wife, who actually, Sarah Stewart Taylor, for those who love murder mysteries, know her name, right?
What do you get for each mention here?
Oh yeah, right. So we actually bid on her name in our advertising for the classes, because the few people out there who know her books might be interested in taking a class with her. But the cost per click, unfortunately, is not that high, right? Because there aren't a lot of people who are bidding on it across the board. Although there are some bookstores, when her new book comes out, who do try to do that, so people would know, oh, I can go to the Norwich bookstore to buy her latest book. Yeah?
In the, I'm not in the non-profit world, but in the non-profit world,
Yep.
aren't you really looking for the inverse? You're not niching down and narrowing in on, Airstream Parts. You're looking for contributions and donors and trying to get this funnel as broad as you can to attract.
Right? And that's where relevance comes in. You could try that, but you'll end up at the bottom anyway, and so it's not going to help you achieve your goal. So let me talk a little bit about Google Grants, and then I'm going to blow through it. This is the most complicated piece of it. This is the most, I think, the most important piece of it, both for small businesses and for nonprofits. So the good news is for nonprofits, so the good news for small businesses is that you can actually compete against the big boys much, much more effectively, efficiently, and impactfully. Okay, so this is good news for small businesses, and that's why we're committed to small businesses as a company. We also started off as one 12 years ago. We're only 12 years old, by the way. So for nonprofits, we have a program that allows you to get AdWords for free. You apply to the Google Grants program. It's a very small, it's a very short application. It's very simple. It takes a while to process it. It's become very popular because of people like me going and sharing it with people. So it can take up to 4 or 5 months to actually get a response to whether or not you qualify. And if you Google Google Grants, you'll find the application form. You also see the parameters. So 501c3 organizations only. We also don't support organizations that are doing significant advocacy, political advocacy as part of their organization. We also don't we don't include organizations that are religious and in their religious nature choose their actually hire based on religion, sexual orientation, race, the like. Okay, so we have some parameters. They're not unusual parameters, but there are parameters that are out there. You get up to $10,000 per year in AdWords. If you get through that $10,000 and there's only a few, there's about 100 nonprofits that actually do, we will boost you up to 40,000. We will ask you to pay a small bit of between that 10,000 and 40,000, so you're really thinking about it, so that folks aren't going and abusing certain AdWords, right? But that's what we do. We also put a maximum click bid at $1. If you want to go above $1, we're going to ask you to pay for it. But up to $1, we give it away for free. Yep.
Just 2 questions. So to understand it, it's the same product you offer.
Yes.
For for-profit businesses.
Correct.
You're just essentially giving them a credit
This
to
is
use
correct.
the same product.
This is our form of philanthropy.
Okay. And the second question would be on, do you publish? Is that available?
What?
Like I could Google search and find out which organizations have been given Google grants? And if not, in the idea of inside the mission to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible. Sorry, Matt.
No, that's great. That's great. I don't believe we publish it. I'm not sure there's a specific reason for us.
I would be
to
interested,
not.
just as an inquiring minds want to know.
I would be happy to pass that
Thank
along.
you, Matt.
I do think, though, that just like for businesses,
Yep.
that we would that there are some nonprofits. You know, having worked for a nonprofit, there are competitors, right? And that we may, out of deference to them, not publish it, so that they can maintain their own strategy for how they can be successful in a particular space. That would be my bet as to why you can't find it online. We do offer examples of nonprofits, and we have summits for the folks who are really performing well, because we want to learn from them.
Yeah.
They actually figure out stuff that we don't know, which is interesting, but also so that they can share and be collaborative. Other questions on the Google Grants AdWords? I want to point out, I did not create the term Google Grants. It's the worst possible thing for a guy in my work, because everyone assumes it's going to be literally writing a check. But that being said, it's there, and that's what we use.
Would you
but
call
it's free
Google
ad.
in kind, maybe?
I would call it, or Google Nonprofit AdWords or something like that. But it's an in-kind contribution that we make across the board, and you can use it. Nonprofit organizations have used it to recruit members, and you do a very different strategy of AdWords for that. Donors is an even different strategy, or even subscribers if you have a publication as part of your 501c3. So you can think about those being very different things that you would be targeting, and you can track performance. And if you're running a good nonprofit, you're wanting to use that $10,000 as effectively as possible. You don't want people going to your site that aren't, and going to the wrong place and then leaving without it going to the right place. So really tracking that information is of great value to a nonprofit that's trying to be efficient and effective. You also don't want inquiries from folks in Topeka if you are focused in Vermont, right? So it's important to do that geo-targeting so you're getting the right people coming to you with the right questions.
Do you have a maximum, AdWords that you grant out, or a maximum amount of nonprofits, or?
Nope. All qualified nonprofits are approved, and at least at this point. And we do not have a maximum in the number of dollars in AdWords, except for that $10,000 per entity. You start to get into some dicey areas if you are a local organization of a large national organization that already has an account. You actually have to have your own unique 501c3. So for some of those that are associated with nationally federated, you've got to look at your structure to figure that out. Yep.
What if you're a nonprofit but not a 501c3?
You do not qualify.
What if you're a project of a 501c3?
You get one account. That 501c3, that EIN number, gets one account. So now, if you have a nonprofit umbrella group that has an AdWord account, there's no skin off their nose unless they're hitting the $10,000 cap for them to allow you or to work with you to set up a campaign for your particular project. Right? Because you can make as many different campaigns as you want. So that might be in their best interest. We have said, though, that if you stop using or updating your AdWord accounts, we will take you off. In fact, you will lose your Google grant. I just want to give that forewarning. Because we don't want for our users to have showing up here on a side a ad for an event that happened a year ago. Right? And since you're not paying for it, you don't pay attention to it. So if you don't update your account over a period of time, we give you a friendly warning, and then you're done. And frankly, getting back into the Google Grant AdWords program is actually difficult to do once we feel like you've not abused, but really not met the value where it was. Yep, one more question, then I'm going to move on. How long are we scheduled for?
You can go until 9.
Okay.
How long has Google been running this particular program? Yeah.
Almost since we started doing AdWords.
Okay.
So it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
We just didn't talk. People found it rather than talking about it, which is our usual way of promoting. This is the Google Grants application. Again, it is really short. It is very simple, and it's easy to do. So the other area that we do promotion is in YouTube grants. YouTube is increasingly a mechanism for being able to communicate in a variety of ways. There is something called a branded YouTube channel. For those of you in the business world, typically a branded YouTube channel costs in the neighborhood of $90,000 to $100,000. It is a significant investment. It allows you to have a pure landing page which is branded to you. That's not true. You can certainly have as many videos that are up there as you want, and just the regular YouTube, which can be searched and linked to. But if you want your own branded channel, you have to you pay for it. Nonprofit world, you can get them for free. Okay, just to give a value prop.
Real quick, just to tell people, Brattleboro College, I think, has a great YouTube channel that you guys set up for them.
Yep.
But silly me, using YouTube and searching for videos, I feel like I've never ran across one of these commercial branded ones. Can you just tell me one or two? I don't care. Does Coke have one? Pepsi? Somebody?
Many of the car dealerships have them. Actually, the major...
I just would like to see it.
There we are.
So this organization...
This is not one that pays for it.
Oh, this is a nonprofit.
A lot of financial institutions have them. I mean, you've got to think about it. If they're going to make an investment of that level, they need to feel like the content that they're going to be presenting is going to be compelling enough to generate a lot of either brand value or actual leads to sales. This is a nonprofit one. This is an autism organization. And you'll notice a few things on it. One is that it's definitely branded with their, logo. You've got other information about the organization that's right here. It really functions somewhat as a web page or a landing page. And you've got a video that's here. And what you also will notice, and I put it right down here, is a little donate button. So when you do a branded channel for a nonprofit, or you do it for a for-profit, you can actually have a point of purchase right there. And what Autism Speaks discovered, as an example, is that you can do all of the written text that you want to try to convince people that it's a good thing to fund. But in fact, there's nothing like actually seeing a video of a story that might be like a family that you know or your own family to actually compel someone to say, yes, I want to be a part of this organization, and you give that opportunity right here. And so in fact what they do is they have an AdWords campaign, and you can imagine the AdWords that would be appropriate for people who are interested in this subject. People then click through on the AdWords. It takes them to this landing page where there's a video that immediately starts as like a PSA. And when someone is moved appropriately, they can go right there and make a contribution. Incredibly powerful for the right types of stories. Yeah?
Are those videos limited to 10 minutes as a normal YouTube video is?
I don't know. I can get that answer for you, but I think so.
Probably in their interest anyway that it be limited.
Yeah, I would strongly advise, unless you're doing television. Now, I will say there are other ones that are longer, and some of our success stories in the YouTube world have actually been, there's this great story in the New York Times about a year and a half ago of these comedians who had actually been rejected from internships at The Daily Show and Saturday Night Live, and so they went and they started they didn't know each other, right? These are two different people. They started doing their own stand-up bit. in front of a camera that they hand, and they posted it. And they started, just telling their friends to share the word. And by the end of the quarter, they would then float ads on the bottom half. And that's also available to nonprofits, to be able to float ads on the bottom half of the screen that you can click through. It stops the video, you go away, you come back, whatever. By the end of the quarter, they were making in excess of $100,000. And one of them had a cable deal, which is turning the whole, the entertainment industry isn't so happy with us right now because it's sort of turning it on its head because the traditional gatekeepers aren't so much there. And these guys who were clearly quite talented, they were able to create an audience, a small fraction of which was willing to click on those ads, but that small fraction added up to some real money, and they were really concerned how they were going to pay the taxes on the money they were getting. But, yeah.
Just a quick question on that. So if they float ads at the bottom, they get a portion of the ad revenue and Google gets a portion of the ad revenue?
Correct. Correct. I could go into the other products. There's something called AdSense. So if you have and this doesn't apply to the nonprofit world, if you have your own website, which has content on it, and you want to allow Google to float ads on it, it's very easy to do. You don't need any special HTML. And someone goes to your website and clicks on one of those ads, we give you a split. And there are individuals, particularly bloggers, who become very popular, who don't want to be out there hawking their own ads on their own site, who use that and make a very tidy living. In fact, the amount of money is quite staggering that comes into a state like Vermont that has a lot of people who are global thought leaders. They live here because they want to live here. Sometimes they're suffering through dial-up in order to update their blog, but they are making a real living off of that. The same is available through our video content as well as our other mediums.
Just a question. When
Yeah.
people are doing that, with the AdSense, it's just ads that are related to their blog content? Google just sort of figures that out?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We look to the content so that it's relevant, because that's in the best interest of everyone. Now you can do things like what's called a Google Blast. And if you wanted for a particular area to have your ads show up on every Google platform, right? Whether it's AdSense partners or everything else, you could pay for that. It's much more expensive. The return on that investment, except for in some very specific cases, isn't so great. But there are ways that you could do that. But for the most part, we stick to this setup. Yeah.
I've seen some very funny AdSense ads where something was being trashed into text.
Yeah.
And then the ad for it appears because it was mentioned.
Yes, there have been. Yes, there are times where the algorithm is not as smart as we would like it to be, but so you want to be careful with those things. But they do come around. Yeah.
As an example of the branded channel,
Yep.
if I were to imagine I was a commercial entity and bought this branded channel, could instead of a donate button, could I have a click-through? Let's say I was a filmmaker
Yep.
and I bought a channel.
Yeah.
Could I make, instead of the donate channel, click through buy the DVD?
Absolutely.
And take it to my own sales platform?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if I had a branded channel, could I have 6 buttons that would take people to different products?
Once that's the benefit of a branded channel.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a link, a limit to number of hyperlinks, that is to take people off of that page.
I haven't heard of a limit.
I could stick 118 buttons on my page.
Sure, I wouldn't advise that.
But this is
Yep.
speculative.
Yep.
I'm just interested. Thank
Yep. Then there's Google Checkout. For those of you who don't know about it, it's our equivalent to PayPal, right? Which is a fine competitor. We like competition at Google, but Checkout is a product that we have that people can use. It's got some advantages. It's somewhat simpler than some of the other merchant accounts that are out there, so you may want more information that this doesn't provide. For nonprofits, the good news is that you can get this for free if you are a Google grant recipient. That's how we contain it. So if you have a Google grant, you can actually have a mechanism for making donations where there is no bank fees and there's no setup charges. And if you are a frugal Yankee like me who's been involved in nonprofits, it was that 2% that drove me nuts, right? That was coming off the top of anything that you raised online. Google Checkout, again, part of our in-kind philanthropy is to allow nonprofits who have a Google grant to be able to have that for free. Okay?
You don't apply again, you're through the channel of Google Grants, and if you've made it through that channel, then you get it.
Correct. Yep.
Is Google Checkout considered still in beta, or you remember you mentioned how you put out?
I haven't looked at it recently. It may well be. So then there's using maps, and again, this is something we learn more from folks that use it than we can come up with in Mountain View. But maps is getting more and more dynamic as it goes along, including being able to do things like embed pictures, embed videos. And so this is an example. You know, I've done some community organizing and some service projects. This is an example of a group that was doing a day of service, and they asked people at the different sites along the way to take pictures and post them.
Oh, cool.
And then they would send out emails to say, hey, everyone's out here doing this. Look, you can see where they are. Go join them. And people would go and join them, and they put a photo, and they put it up, you know, and add to it over time. In Earth, there are other opportunities with that, but it's in real time that you can direct people to it. You know, you can imagine for those who've been involved with campaigns, the opportunities that come with being able to do that kind of dynamic sharing. And again, because everyone can access it, it doesn't just have to go to one computer. You can be continually, you can tweet that we're out here on this corner, go to this map link, and you can see what's happening. People can go, they see the activity, they see the action. Also for people, and some nonprofits, they do this for people who would donate to support the event. Say, hey, you should see what's going on. Your resources are going to really good work. Go here and you can see it. Which is actually kind of a very positive, intimate way for donors to say, oh, all right, they're not just sitting on their hands taking our money and spending on salaries. They're getting good stuff done. Okay? And then there's Google Earth. And, you know, there's also now Google Mars, which if you haven't played with, is pretty extraordinary. You can actually pretend you're flying on Mars, which is a little surreal. And there's also Google Oceans, which actually Eric Schmidt, our CEO, believes is the greatest contribution that Google has made to date to science, which is taking all of the information that's available in visuals on oceans and turning it into a 3D format that you can actually fly through. Fascinating stuff. But you can also use it for to showcase your work. There is a 3D piece of it that you can use through SketchUp. And in fact, there's a class at Hartford High School that decided as part of their project, it was a combined history and industrial arts project, which is for those kids who aren't supposed to be so good in school. But they were good at three-dimensional rendering. And so they created three-dimensional renderings of the historic buildings of downtown White River. They then went and interviewed people who knew the history of it. They then did a written history of it, attached it to it as well, put it through our warehouse, and it's now part of the Google Earth experience. You can actually go around, and they wrapped it so that it's actual pictures of it in 3 dimensions. And we then were able to highlight this group of 11th graders as having contributed to the Google community. It was pretty exciting, and it was a reflection of how, A, this can be used well and easily. The educational value you can probably imagine, particularly for this group of students. And it was, I wish I could claim it was my doing that Hartford did that. It wasn't. They did it on their own, and someone said, hey, do you know anyone in White River Junction? Which was where well, anyway, yes?
To actually add to that, I met some of these kids last fall in Killington. They were at an educational conference presenting what they'd done. Some of those students actually received scholarships and are going to college for like architecture now because of that project. So it's really awesome. I've looked at it and seen it.
It's a very empowering medium. It's because I mean, SketchUp, which is again one of our products, is a 3D rendering piece where you don't have to know how to use a CAD machine to be able to do. And in fact, more and more architects are doing their first drafts of depictions using that because you don't have to send these massive files all over the place. You can say, go here on this link, and you can see what they are envisioning as that, and you can fly around it, you can go inside, they can build out the depictions inside. Very, very powerful in a variety of ways, but it's also powerful This is hard to see in this light, but this was done on a 20% time project by a couple of engineers who were very concerned about the situation in the Sudan. And they learned that the Holocaust Museum was going to do a exhibition on Darfur, and they offered to help build out, this was early in Google Earth, an interface that would really show visually what took place during this war and conflict and the genocide. And it was interesting. In typical Google fashion, well, there was the opening of this exhibit was covered on NPR, and they had the President Bush at the time, commented specifically on this particular part of the exhibition. You can imagine on a huge screen, and you're able to then click through and drill down to right down to the village and information on it. And he said, you know, it really brought home to me in a way that all the briefings in the world did not, about what was going on and about the issues that were involved in the conflicts that had gone on for generations. And then they interviewed the Google engineer that was the lead on this, and he said, you know, I wanted to contribute in some way. In typical Google fashion, that was the first that any of us had heard about this project, was on NPR standing there with the president. And there are companies that I have known about and certain organizations I've worked for where you would get fired if the first time you hear about it is there. Because we are the company that we are, we actually highlighted this as the classic example of being Google, of using our products for good use in a way that was innovative and in a way that you didn't have to ask any permission, because we trust that we will do good things. So it was a very powerful utilization of this. There is the fact that we own Blogger, which is a platform for doing online publishing through a blog. Very easy to use. And it changes. I mean, I could go, I do one of these things on the future of education in the internet era, but it allows for people to be able to publish to the world with very few barriers to entry. Almost none, except for being able to have access to a computer. You don't even have to have one. You can use a local library, for example, to be able to publish. And if you have the right words or message that people want to follow, you will gain huge audiences. And you can put some AdWords at the bottom, as we mentioned, to do a split, and you can actually make money off of a blog. But again, it's creating that, which creates a situation where, again, the traditional gatekeepers for communication, book publishers and others, are just not as necessary in order to be a communicator. And you can see that in terms of, in fact, there was a local blogger down this way who was actually seen as the #1 factor in Peter Welch beating Martha Rainville. #1 factor. Does anyone know this story? So there was a local blogger who blogged about, her blog covered politics and birding. Right? I think that's perfect for Vermont. Covered politics and birding. And she was a teacher. And there is software that's available that allows teachers to put a paper, right, into the system to find out if someone had plagiarized. Right? It's a little program that you can do. You can run that through. So this person was looking and read something that sounded really familiar on Martha Rainville's website. She was like, boy, I wonder if that's, you know, taken from another speech she gave or something else that I read. So she took the content, she ran it through, and discovered that most of the website had been directly lifted from two places. One was the Bush-Cheney website, and the other was Hillary Clinton's website. So what does the blogger do? Does she call WCAX? No. Does she call the Peter Welch campaign? No. She blogs about it. She puts it up on her blog that had about, at the time, 12 readers a week, right? But it happened that one of the readers was Peter Frayne, and another one of the readers was Ross Sneed from the AP. And suddenly that blog post became the 6 o'clock news, which became the next day's news because the site was still up. The site was then down for 3 days. It became a 7-day story about Martha Rainville, before she had established her ads, having plagiarized other other websites. That type of thing, fired the underpaid person who had actually put it together. But by that point, there was already a sense of, is this the right person for the job? Very, very powerful. You also have situations in schools where students at a very young age are suddenly getting a much bigger following than their teacher realizes because they're able to have that kind of two-way communication much, much, much faster. I could go into other stuff, but it's a powerful, powerful tool if you're doing messaging. There's also personalized home pages. If you get an iGoogle page, it's actually, for your home page, it actually allows you to put in things like the weather, the news alerts that you want, but you can also work as a nonprofit to encourage your members or your donors or your employees to have certain things that will get updates from your organization. Right? So it's a very powerful tool. It's right there in front of them. They know about it. You can get specific feeds across the board. It allows you to drive traffic to your site and back. And then there's subscribed links, which it's an interesting thing. You can actually subscribe for information on searches from a particular source. So if you know that the Berkman Center at Harvard is a trusted source of information on the law and the internet, you could say, I want subscribed links to the Berkman Center thing, so when I put in, FCC decisions, that Berkman Center things come up first. If you are an organization that produces information, you could encourage people who are members or anything else to actually subscribe to your links, so that the things that you have archived shows up first on their listing. A number of nonprofits have used that very, very effectively. There's Google Groups, which some of you may use to be able to stay in touch. And then there's Google Analytics that I talked about before, which you don't even need to be an AdWord customer to be able to use Google Analytics to know who's coming to your website, when, what pages they're going to, whether they're staying, whether they're actually fulfilling things. Maybe certain parts of your site are more popular than others. Very, very powerful to be able to determine. Yep?
What's the address?
For Google Analytics? Just Google Analytics, and it will tell you how to do it. Yeah?
Why is that so tough to find under your products listings? It's not under labs, it's not under trends, it's not in the listing. I always have a hard time getting to it.
I can't answer that. Usually if you Google it, it comes up pretty quickly. And you know what, and I say that somewhat in jest, but Google actually thinks about things in terms of search, right? Trying to get them to put all the nonprofit products on one page took me a year, right? Because they said, well, why don't they just Google, Google Grants or Google for Nonprofits or whatever, and they'll get the list of things. It's really an orientation around search, which, by the way, my 4-year-old, that's how he thinks about it. He doesn't ask for a particular video. He says, Mama, I want a video with a monkey and Batman. And she's like, which video is that? It was like, no, I want you to find me one. And so she puts in monkey and Batman, and lo and behold, there is a video about Batman fighting a monkey. It's just a different way of thinking about it. But that's just as an aside. But more and more people are starting to think in that way, which changes very much how you use the internet, how you use search, how you think about how you position your company or your home page, or whether a home page really matters anymore, right? Shouldn't you have 400 that are tailored to what it is that someone is actually searching for at that moment, rather than having them click through 6 different places, right? And this will help you figure out, you could test 7 different landing pages, right, and see which one actually takes. It's an interesting, it gives a world of opportunity. Google Analytics, free for everyone. But if you don't have some way of tracking the traffic to your website, get this up. It'll help you tremendously in knowing whether you're doing well with your position. So that's on your message everywhere. How's everyone doing? I'm going to launch into another section, which is about Google Enterprise and using cloud computing. People doing all right? Okay. You're a patient crowd. This is good. Okay. Or at least most of you are. Yes. All right. So, and this is in the definitely in the collaboration section, and this is called Apps for Nonprofits, which is also known in the for-profit world as Google Enterprise. And basically, it's software that enables collaboration, because what we do is we actually put all of the software and all of the products not on these things, but in those server farms that I mentioned before. And when you do that, it means that anyone from anywhere, as long as you've got an internet connection, can all collaborate on the same thing on the same thing at the same time, and more so in real time. It's close to real time, but not quite. You can have an integrated, the product suite that we have in the Apps for Nonprofits or the Google Enterprise product is your calendar, is your email, is documents with unlimited storage. It now has video with unlimited storage that you can have internally. I think there are length limits, although I think in the full-blown enterprise version there isn't a length limit, so you can actually have internal videos that you can, if you have that for training or things like that that you don't want published to the world. Your email address, and this is important, your email address can be maintained. So it's not like you would have to go to @Gmail in order to go onto this email program. You can still be at marlborocollege.edu or whatever else. So it just is running on a Gmail platform. How many of you use Gmail for your private? Oh, wow, okay. So a fair number. So it's basically using that interface, which has a whole bunch of other positive attributes to it. But it's using it to the outside world. They don't know that you've changed your email platform. It's the same email address. And there are nice things like you don't ever have to erase your email. Ever. Right? Which is a different thing for those of you who have been tortured by the evil IT guy who comes and threatens that they're going to shut down your whole computer if you don't start cleaning out email. So it's unlimited. And then you use, again, the search function. Right? So people who have been brought up on Gmail do not have folders. Because you can search the content of it. And so they just archive. Now, you can put labels on it. If you really like, if your brain works that you want things so you can pull up, Lenore, North Carolina, which is one of our communities. I still do that because I'm old at Google. I'm one of the old guys. I'm 4 years older than the founders. So I still like having that sort of folder thing with labels on. But for the most part, they just sort of keep in their head what are the kinds of words that would be in that thing, and then they just pull that up. And it finds the 16 emails that has that word in it. And you look through, if you just look at 16, and you're like, oh, it's the fifth one. There it is, and you pull it up. And there is 24/7 phone support. Yeah?
Just a quick question about the Google Apps for Nonprofits. Do you have to have a Google the grants?
No. Nope. And it's available for institutions of higher education, K-12, as well as 501c3s. So, and the way that I talk about things like docs is in the context of collaborating like it's 1999. This is how we talk. Now, you have all probably, looking at the folks here, have experienced this, where all right, you've written a document and you're really excited about the document, but you've got to get feedback from a bunch of folks, right? So you do the Word document and you send it out to John, Bob, Sally, and Rachel, right? And these are all people you trust. Bob's your boss. John's the best writer at the organization. Sally just has a good sense of what's good and bad. And then Rachel, who you've got to get it cleared by in order to get it through and published, right? And so John, Bob, and Sally write up their comments. They do it in track changes and all that kind of stuff. And they send it back to you, right? But then suddenly you've got 3 different versions. Right? And you're trying to bring together all 3 of those versions, and John actually disagrees with Bob. Like one of them's telling you need to include this paragraph, and the other one says you've got to make it shorter. So you're trying to bring all those things together, and you send it back out, right? You create that version 2.0, and you're labeling all these, right? And you've got a special folder now just for that document, right? So, and you do that, and then you send it back out. And John says, wait a minute, you didn't hear my comments, right? Because they happen to be different from Bob, and Bob's your boss, so you're going to listen to Bob, but John doesn't know that. And that Sally over here has a whole bunch of different comments and says actually you should be adding a whole glossary at the front, and maybe this whole premise wasn't great in general. You've got all those things, and you're now trying to absorb those, and then suddenly Rachel opens her inbox and picks it up for the first time and goes, oh my goodness, this is so important. I've got to give all this feedback because it's really dangerous and I'm not going to allow it to be. And you send, and you've got that coming in, but it's based on this original document. And what do you do with that? I don't know what you do with her feedback, because at this point it's 6 generations later and she's commenting on the first one. So that is what we refer to as collaborating like it's 1999. But there is a solution, which is the cloud. And cloud computing is a term that is now bandied about a great bit, which basically means distributed computing. So again, that your documents and the software that affects that document is not sitting here in multiple versions that you're sending out in all different ways. It sits somewhere else, and people access it at the same time. It allows you to have much more computing power. It allows you to basically, in this thing, have all the computing power you ever wanted. You might want a bigger keyboard, right? And the screen is a little small. But because it's being connected to something out there, it can be as thin and light as possible, which means the cost of these things drives down. Which is actually, it's exactly like mainframes. We're going full circle. It's just that the mainframes at the time you had to be relatively close to, right? Now you can be hundreds, if not thousands of miles away.
But the key to it all is high-speed broadband connectivity.
The key is high-speed broadband connectivity.
Because you're in America and you need one of the telecommunications monopolies to get their cut for you to access the cloud.
Maybe, unless there's good competition that drives it down. Well, right? Which
They
I
were
actually
given
believe is
$200 billion in handouts 10 years ago, and we got ripped off. I just had to get that out there.
That's good. I'm glad you do. I don't think we would disagree with you. Actually, that's which is why it's important to make sure that there is ubiquitous access to broadband.
I'm on board with you guys on that.
That's good. That's good. So that's the cloud. And we went down this road because that's how search engines work, right? If you had to have enough computing power to download the entire internet, much less do the algorithm against it, you would not have much of a search. So we had already figured out how to do that in a distributed way, so that your interface would be able to just search on the location where that computing power was, and get the answer back in less than a second. As you probably see, we still measure ourselves by how fast we get those responses to you. So that's the concept of the cloud, and it allows for all of these things to be done in real collaboration. We now have Google Chat Video, right? So in the normal chat box, you can actually do video conferencing with anyone else who's got this, who's on the Gmail platform. And Gmail is free to everyone. You can get that kind of access. If you do the enterprise version, if you're a business, the price is about $50 per user per year, which compared to paying for, let's say, a Microsoft license, is a little bit less. It's a subscription basis, so it's different, but you get then control over it. You get to use your own domain. You have administrative rights and those kinds of things.
Do the ads disappear on your?
They do. You can take them off. Yep, if you do. And same for apps for nonprofits, which is a slightly lighter version than the full enterprise. I haven't known a nonprofit who was missing some of the features that enterprise versions need, but you get rid of the ads and all those kinds of things, and it's for free. So calendar, documents, and the like. This is about, I was mentioning, for those who aren't familiar with the Gmail interface, the whole idea of threads is really, really revolutionary. So you actually have the conversations all connected to each other, rather than having to search through your box for the last time that conversation was, which was 3 months ago, or whatever else. It's all threaded in there, and everything is completely searchable. The calendars, if you haven't played with Google Calendars, incredibly powerful because people can post different things on your calendar. In the nonprofit world, it helps because for a variety of reasons, but if you're working with a board, right? You're not going to want to be paying for special licenses or have them have to dial into a specific server to be able to access documents for that board, or to have a calendar that they have certain information. Now, you don't want to give the board all the information, those of you who work with boards, because God knows they will start meddling with what's going on. But if you want to have some high-level pieces that the board wants to know about, you can share that with them. And they can add things and subtract things depending on what you give them access to. It's a very powerful tool. At Google, if you have a free time in the core work hours, that's considered fair game, right? You don't ask, are you open at 9 o'clock? You book a meeting. And if you haven't thought to mention that you're going to be in an airport about to get on a plane at that time, it's considered your fault, right? So you keep it up to date. And then people on different continents, and I literally collaborate with people on all but one continent, and they are actually trying to find those times where we can have a video conference with someone in Austria and someone in Singapore. It's a very narrow window. But they do that through these calendars because everyone can see what everyone else has booked. You can choose to share what the details are of it or not as a default, or on an individual basis. So if it's a personal thing, you can say, just show it as busy, right? So that's how the calendar works. And again, on the cloud, it's just so much more powerful. Documents for those of you who at one point were an administrative assistant. Between that and being a waiter, those were the two best lessons I ever had for politics. You know the torture of trying to get people to fill out their contact information or their budget information. You have to get it from each individual person, then you have to put it in, you send out the spreadsheet, then you have to merge all the spreadsheet. You just share a spreadsheet. Send an email around and say, here's the link to the spreadsheet, you put it in. The same with documents. You're all looking at the same document. You're not sending different versions. We literally will get on a conference call, all looking at the same document, and we'll edit it in live time. Right? So if people have their comment, how does this look? Oh, great, okay, and you save that. And then the other piece to it is it saves all of the versions. You don't have to pick and choose which was your favorite version, 1.6 or 2.7 MBD or whatever. It saves all of them. It's timestamped. Says who did the update on it. And it saves it forever. So you can go back, if you really like that quote 6 versions ago, you can go back and find it. It's right there. Pull it back out, put it back up, and go. That's the power of using the cloud. And then this is the final piece. This is something called Forms, which I think is the most under-publicized thing that we have. How many of you have used SurveyMonkey? How many of you have liked using SurveyMonkey? All right, one person. I used it a lot. It drove me nuts. We have something called Forms, which basically allows you to do a survey. It's very easy to use. You can email it. It can be embedded in an email. And it automatically populates a spreadsheet. It's actually out of our spreadsheet problem. And so you can just send it out, and it in real time brings it back, puts it, it's very easy, even someone like me who doesn't know how to use code at all, you just say, I want a pie chart. And it puts it into a pie chart, the results of it. And the interesting, we sent out a 10,000 email form to ask the nonprofit community that we work with their opinions on different things. And we sent it out, and you could actually watch the pie chart move as people were responding to it. So it's a very, very powerful, easy-to-use tool. It's free, and it's robust. You can send it to lots and lots of folks that are out there for a wide variety of things, including sign-ups for things, registration, anything that you can imagine that someone would be able to put it in that you would want to capture in a spreadsheet format. This is the administrator console for it. And this is some just statements on return on investment on the for-profit side. It is, and this was in the government at the District of Columbia that switched over to Google Enterprise early on. They said the statement from Vivek, who is actually now the Chief Technical Officer for the country. He was first the CIO for Washington, D.C., said, why should I spend millions on enterprise apps when I can do at 1/10 the cost and at 10 times the speed? talking about switching over to cloud computing products.
What's his position? Did you say now?
I believe, no, I'm sorry. He is the he's the CIO for the country.
For the Fed? Federal
Yep,
government.
for the federal government. So it's a powerful tool. It's much less expensive for small businesses. It allows small business again to have the computing power of a very large business, right? And that's the opportunity that's there at a very low entry cost.
Basic issue of trust.
Excuse me?
Trust and security.
Absolutely. As long as you look, Google is fully aware that this is a leap of faith. We also are fully aware that if that faith becomes compromised, it's going to be difficult for us to continue to have customers the way that we do.
But it has been compromised with other servers and other organizations.
How do you mean?
I mean, people breaking in to other servers to get information.
Non-Google servers.
Non-Google. Correct. Correct. And that's the other point. When people are worried about the security thing, compared to other options that people use, which is usually a server down in the closet downstairs and nobody knows who has the key to it, it's pretty darn secure. So it's all along a continuum, and some people decide that it's worthwhile, some people don't. More and more government entities are switching over to it. More and more very large corporations are switching over to it. And we're very committed to that security being cleared. Nothing is perfect, but it's more secure, arguably, than setups that people have right now in a variety of locations.
China.
And in China, look, there was a compromise of our security by people who were aggressively attacking it, and we changed, right? And we decided enough is enough, and we pulled out. So we take it very seriously. The number of breaches of security of servers that sit in the closets are also high. So look, there's a cost benefit to all this stuff, and we don't claim that it's perfect. It just seems to be a solution for some people who want to go in that direction.
All of this seems overwhelming. Now maybe that's because it's all new to me, I'm hearing it, and it has to be digested.
Sure.
Is this something that one person could actually get on top of this, or do you end up hiring a whole bunch of, you're meant to have a micro business, and
Yep.
you end up having to hire 3 people?
Yep. No. So here's there's. I want to be really clear, and some people at Google, I think, drank a little bit too much of the Kool-Aid and said, you should be able to switch over to enterprise instantaneously without any work at all. It's not true. Especially if you have a legacy business. If you're starting a new business, it's very easy, right? Because you're not taking documents from one format and switching it into another, although it's getting easier and easier to do that. You're not switching over legacy email and all those folders that you've loved for years and trying to flip it into a Gmail context. There are consultants that do help with those transitions, but it's a transition that takes days, not weeks or months or a year and a half, like some switchovers. But then once you get it running, it's really, really easy because you don't have servers to maintain, you don't have to fix them, you don't have to ask for someone to go and find that email that you deleted by accident because they made you to, and that kind of thing. So in fact, you end up having much less IT costs in the long term as a result.
How do you evaluate a consultant so you don't, because somebody who knows 3 things more than I do might convince me that they're really good. And,
we don't have a formal referral process at Google. What I would recommend is that you ask them for 3 references and you call them just like you would with any other contractor. But there is now, there's some folks there's a company called Aperio, which I've worked with particularly for nonprofit organizations. I'm not saying they're any better or worse than anyone else, but they've got a fairly standard setup, a clear cost that would be to flip it over and to get it done. But I think there are some. Said I didn't have a ready referral. Appario. But there are lots of Vermont. What I love about Vermont is you keep on uncovering companies that are already doing this stuff and better than anywhere else in the country. And some folks at Google said, "Oh, you're in Vermont, that's great, you must know the guys at dealer.com.
Yeah.
They're one of our great customers." I was like, "Oh, I haven't met them," and so went up and said hi, just right when they were about to announce 300 more jobs. Which was, and they use Google a lot. There's also a company called Epic One that is an online advertising company, considered one of the best in the country, and they're based up in Burlington. I'm sure there are other folks who have become specialists in expertise. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the issues with cloud computing?
Yep.
To us older guys.
Yep.
Is the connection.
Yep.
Which is unreliable. The connection goes down, and that happens in this town very regularly. And suddenly you haven't lost your data, you've lost access to your data.
Briefly.
Briefly, for some period of time.
Yep.
And then the age-old fear of, well, what happens if something happens to the service? I've lost my data.
Yep.
And that has happened, I think a telephone company should remain nameless, lost 6 million customers worth of data not that long ago.
Sure.
Because a data center went down and was unrecoverable. So, is there a statistic, a percentage, or what's the likelihood?
So I can't speak for your own internet connection, obviously. Gmail, I don't know the exact facts, so don't quote me on this, but I can only think of an instance when Gmail was down for any period of time. Let me tell you, we heard about it very, very quickly. What I do know is that the downtime and we haven't lost data, to my knowledge, at all. And we keep many copies for just that reason. In fact, we also split up the data to different, so people much smarter than I have figured out how to take pieces of your email and have them stored in different data centers in different locations, which makes it much harder to hack. For example, if anyone wanted to find it, they'd only find one piece of it and that kind of thing. It also allows for much more redundancy, so that that's protected. But compared to what most people have as a homegrown setup, even with backup systems and everything else, it's considered much more secure. I mean, the redundancy is many times over. Frankly, if we have the data go down for Google, there's probably issues much more important that you should be worried about, because we have so many data centers that have so many replications in different locations that are on different grids, different weather zones, all that stuff. So we've had it slow, but that's very different from it going down or going away. Yeah.
I really liked your map idea, the Google map, especially I work with businesses that are directly involved with not-for-profits.
Sure.
We have events, and we have one coming up, and I'm like, wow, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the business that I represent is its location on Google Map is incorrect, and we haven't been successful at being able to fix that. Any suggestions?
So there is a place where you can update your own. You want to go into the company profile.
Mm-hmm. I think they've done this already, but
and then change the address,
mm-hmm.
and then it'll flip it around. It should. If it does, I mean, it's very funny. I'm one of the few people that actually gives out cards from Google, so you can imagine the number of inquiries I have on those kinds of things.
I think that they've actually tried just about everything possible. They're actually located in a pretty affluent area in Monmouth County, New Jersey.
Yep.
So they have had help with this, but no one's been able to successfully fix it. If I could, I'd be have a job for a lifetime.
Yes, and I think it was Randolph that appears in the middle of Lake Champlain. So I can appreciate that. So there is a help center. It takes a little bit of time because we're trying to mash together an incredible number of data points that frequently started off not quite accurate, and then hopefully having the tools so that you can go and auto-correct it in a way that it works without allowing people to play mischief. Mm-hmm. And that's our balance. So I will leave you my card if you have real problems. I'm happy to try to do it, but you're probably faster going through the current way. There's an escalation process, because it's in our best interest to get it right.
Yes.
Right, so we're committed to doing that, and I'm happy to help try to navigate a little bit. There should be a mechanism for doing it.
Thanks.
So let me just bang through the last few things. One is that for those of you who don't know about it, there's the Goog 411 program, as well as Google Voice. Goog 411 is an 800 number that allows you to get business listings, and it connects you directly to those phone numbers, and it's free, rather than paying some phone company or another for those connections, for those kinds of listings. You also can do a Google search against it. So you can say pizza Montpelier, and it will give you the top Google search for pizza places in Montpelier. And you can pick the one you want, in case you're like me and you forget the name of the restaurant you're supposed to meet your wife at. So this is it's a really powerful tool. It's all voice recognition. We continue to improve the voice recognition, so sometimes it doesn't work at first, but it usually works pretty darn well, and that's a process. Google Voice, if you haven't played with that, is a really extraordinary product where you can have a phone number, it can be a Vermont exchange. That phone number then can ring on any phone with its own phone number you want, or multiple phones. So if you're a small business person and you may want to actually go home at some point, but a client might still call, you could have it call on your cell phone and your home office number and your office number, all at the same time. You can determine certain phone numbers will only call on all three, and others will only call on one. Then when someone leaves a voicemail, it transcribes it the best you can, but usually pretty well. But more importantly, has a voice packet and emails it to your Gmail account. So I don't check my voicemail anymore because it goes into this Gmail thing, and I can search against the text that's been transcribed or the phone number, and you have the voice packet that you can forward to someone like David, who works with me, to get back to the person who is there because I want to get back to them sooner than I'll be able to. Very, very powerful tool. It's free, and there are also VoIP options with it as well. So it's just a very powerful tool to transition to.
Yeah, and you can screen your calls.
Oh yeah, you know. So they say when someone answers, you say the person says their name, and then you answer the phone, and it says so and so is trying to reach you, and you can decide I want to speak to so and so, or I don't, or that really isn't so and so, and I can tell because I know their voice. So it's a very, very powerful tool. Again, it's free, and we have it out. And that comes to my final point, just looking to the future and why we are doing all these things with mobile. We have an Android platform that we allow multiple phones to use. This is a Google phone, which is the Nexus 1. And the reason is that as you do cloud computing, this is the size, or an iPad, which came out after I did the slide deck, where you can get all the computing power in the world, or many, many more times what you thought was it, on a small device like this. And more people are using this, to the point where I've heard some industry experts say that over the course of this year, the number of people who will use mobile devices, phones, for news search, general search, and the purchasing of goods is going to increase 6-fold. And if you think of that in the grand scheme of things, and that is likely to continue at that kind of acceleration rate, you may want to think about how you're orienting the business work that you do, as well as the nonprofit work that you do, to be thinking about it in terms of mobile devices. It is a very different way to think about it. We have Google Voice, Android, GPS. We have a new GPS application, which is awesome. You can put in a location, and you just sort of stick it up there. We have these little things you can hold it on, and it will literally, just like a regular GPS that you have to, like a Merlin or whatever else, it will direct you there with a little dot. It'll tell you to turn right, it'll turn left, and it integrates into Street View. So in case you want to make sure you're at the right, it shows a picture of the house that you're arriving at, perhaps in a different season, but it's a very powerful tool. The other thing that the new platform does is that it has everything that can respond to voice. Meaning every single thing you can do, you can speak into it and it transcribes it, and more it knows what you're asking for, so it can search against it. And so you're less and less having to actually do this, because you can just speak into it and it transcribes it perfectly. So there's a debate right now about texting while driving. Right? And I was asked about it in a forum. Do you support the ban on texting while driving? And I said, absolutely, if you mean texting physically with your thumbs. Because why not have a conversation using your Bluetooth, right? This is sitting over here, or it's sitting on a thing, and you're actually going back and forth with someone on text. You're just doing it verbally. They're seeing it reading. And just to think about it in a larger context, we now have the ability to transcribe from voice, right? You can go from words to voice, right? So it can say what it's saying. And we have the ability to translate in over 300 languages. So if you think about that, and it happens instantaneously, we're almost to the point where you could speak one language here and have someone on the other end hear it in a different language. With a variety of accuracy. I'm not sure you want to do major, military diplomacy over that. But if you think about it, that's how the pieces are merging, and they're coming together in a very powerful way. So this is the information that we just talked about. This is the website. It's not a fancy website, but if you're a nonprofit, this is where you can go for google.com/nonprofits. We have a similar page for small businesses. And that's it. Questions? This is a real sign, by the way. We love this. It was in part of the more churchy area of the country. A lot of time. Yes?
Not necessarily totally off topic. Can you just talk a little bit more about China? You talked about you've pulled out. Have you really, truly pulled out of China? I'll tell you why. My sister lives in China right now. And she follows the rest of the family by the family's blogs. And those blogs are now gone. Access to those blogs is gone. So that's pretty catastrophic. Skype and those kind of communications are still going into VoIP.
So we moved our operation to Hong Kong and out of China mainland because we felt that it was the right thing to do when they were using our presence there to be able to target dissidents. So we moved out. The balance that we were trying to strike was what that would do for limitations of people within China to have access to information. And that's the balance that we have consistently looked at. It's all about the democratization of information. But ultimately, the decision was a decision that was just fascinating to watch the internal debate, which we were able to really view in real time, was ultimately we had to draw a line. And that was the line we drew. Thank you so much for coming out and being a part of this. And,